She's just the weather girl with a clipboard, not a killer. Let her fetch coffee, not rifles. The laughter stung, but she didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She didn't even look up. She needed wind speed, air pressure, and proof. Hours later, when every elite sniper missed, she picked up a borrowed Barrett, lay prone on the ridge, adjusted for variables no one else even considered, and fired. One shot, 3,840 meters, center mass, no applause, just stunned silence, and a name they hadn't heard in years. Voss. Elara Voss. But breaking the record was only the beginning. The real test came when lives were on the line, and the shot wasn't just about distance. The morning air at Fort Blackwood was razor sharp, the kind that bit into your lungs and reminded you this was no ordinary range. This wasn't boot camp. It was the proving ground for the elite, the shooters who never missed, the ones who were sent in when every other option had failed. And this morning, among the men in tactical gear, war-tested patches, and thousand-yard stares, stood someone who didn't belong. Elara Voss stepped off the bus with nothing but a clipboard tucked under her arm. No unit patch, no visible rank, no swagger. Her olive fatigues were clean but plain, her boots too new, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a regulation bun so tight it looked like it was trying to disappear. Just like her. She kept her eyes low as the others gathered near the staging area. The men laughed, adjusted their gear, traded mission scars and wind correction formulas like poker chips. But no one looked at her, or if they did, it was a glance, quickly dismissed, unbothered. The moment she walked past Corporal Sutter, lean, sharp-jawed, with that smirk only earned through misplaced confidence, elbowed the guy next to him. "Hey, check it out. Weather girl brought her clipboard. Someone tell her the real rifles are over there." Laughter rippled through the circle. Elara didn't blink. She just stopped, adjusted her grip on the clipboard, and moved to the back of the formation. At precisely 0700, Master Sergeant Rourke stepped forward. The man was carved from stone, tall, weathered, eyes like sandpaper, and a voice that sounded like it had seen too many wars and survived just enough of them. "Listen up," he barked. "This isn't a training op. This is live mission preparation. What we're practicing here will be used in a real-world extraction next week. You screw up now, people die later." A hush fell. Behind him, a large screen flickered to life, showing satellite maps of steep mountain terrain marked with red lines and sniper positions. Wind vectors, barometric overlays, infrared traces, the kind of mission data most never saw outside a war room. "We're pushing beyond standard engagement ranges," Rourke continued. "Shots at over 3,000 meters, full environmental variables, real gear, real pressure. Your names are on the board. This is not about rank, it's about performance." The team nodded. All but one. Elara remained still, almost statuesque. She scanned the data with the kind of focus that didn't look like curiosity. It looked like memory, like she'd already seen this terrain before, maybe in files no one else had clearance to view. When Rourke began assigning roles, she already knew what was coming. Primary shooters, Lieutenant Hale, Corporal Sutter, Sergeant Munoz. Spotters, Gentry, Lasco. Atmospheric analysis and wind triangulation, Specialist, Voss. That last word barely drew breath from Rourke's mouth, as if even saying it felt misplaced. "You'll be logging data. Stay clear of firing platforms. Understood?" "Yes, Sergeant," Elara replied softly. She stepped aside. No one protested. They didn't need to. In their minds, the decision was obvious. The girl with the clipboard wasn't there to shoot. She was there to take notes, preferably quietly. As the team began breaking off into pairs, moving to their designated sniper nests, Sutter walked past her slowly, voice just loud enough to carry. "Bet she's never fired anything bigger than a stapler." She didn't respond, but her knuckles whitened slightly around the clipboard. The ghosts of laughter followed her as she walked the ridge alone. She climbed past the sight lines toward her assigned post, the weather station just beyond the shooters' platforms. There, surrounded by tech, wind flags, and sensors no one respected, Elara Voss took her position. Not as a marksman, not yet, but as a silent observer, the invisible variable. What they didn't know, she had memorized every ballistic chart from that satellite map. She knew the crosswinds downrange before the machines even pinged them. And that clipboard? It didn't hold just numbers. It held legacy. It held proof. But for now, she was just the weather girl, and that's exactly how she wanted it. The wind was inconsistent that day. Cold mountain air collided with heat rising from the valley, creating invisible shifts that twisted bullets off course and tempers. Elara Voss stood at the observation post with her back to the shooters, clipboard steady, eyes sweeping the flags, noting every sudden flutter, every shift in leaf line, every pressure dip on her portable sensor. She wrote without pause, her pen a metronome to the chaos below. Downrange Lieutenant Hale, tall, squared off, in textbook perfect, adjusted his scope for the third time. Crack. Miss. He frowned, leaned back, looked at his spotter. The wind didn't match the last shot's calibration. It wasn't adding up. Elara looked up for a moment. The primary wind flag near the firing line pointed east, but two-thirds downrange, the midline marker curled west, opposite direction. The wind had split at the 1,500-meter mark, creating a spiral cross-current, the kind of thing that didn't show up on static sensors unless you were looking for it. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "Sir," she said quietly, "there's a secondary rotation forming mid-range. The bullet drift is being reversed around 450 meters." Hale barely glanced at her. "Is that so?" he said, tone flat. "You a shooter now, Voss?" She didn't answer. "Copy that," he muttered, turning back to the rifle. He adjusted his windage, precisely to the correction she would have made. Crack. Hit. Center left. Hale didn't acknowledge her, just nodded slightly, as if he'd come to the conclusion himself. She returned to her post in silence. By midday, the range was tense. The veterans had expected to dominate, but the wind was making fools of them. Even Corporal Sutter, once so smug, was muttering under his breath after each miss. "Something's off," he said, scanning the sky like it had betrayed him. Elara already had 3 pages of notes, not just data, patterns. She noticed which shooters ignored terrain drag, who failed to account for barometric drop after sunrise, who still didn't understand the valley's split pressure pockets. She marked it all, but no one watched her, which was perfect. During lunch, the shooters grouped in the mess tent, replaying their misses, blaming optics, blaming terrain. Hale sat at the center, animated, precise, mapping corrections with hand gestures. But Elara? She sat outside alone, knees drawn up, notebook resting on her lap. She was still calculating, not eating, not complaining, just writing, rebuilding wind models based on current behavior, adjusting prediction curves. The world around her faded, and the memory came rushing back. Flashback. A younger Elara, maybe 12, lying in the grass beside a tall, quiet man. Her father, Gideon Voss. They were far from any official range, just a clearing in the Colorado hills, with a bolt-action rifle resting beside a weathered thermos. "Wind isn't your enemy," he'd said softly. "It's your instructor. It tells you what kind of shot you'll earn today." Young Elara nodded, scribbling numbers into a spiral notebook, but she didn't really understand them. Not yet. "Most shooters only look here," Gideon tapped his chest. "What they want, what they fear. Some look here," he tapped her forehead. "But the best? They look out there, where the target really lives." "I don't want to shoot like them," she whispered. "I want to shoot like you." He smiled, sadness tucked behind his eyes. "Then you'll have to see what they refuse to." Back in the present, Elara blinked away the memory and flipped a page. She wrote down a new theory. Split strata airflow. 3-layer separation at high noon. Not something even the techs would think to test for. But she saw it. She felt it. The wind was teaching, and she, not the others, was listening. No one noticed that every shooter who hit their mark that morning did so only after a correction quietly passed from her post. No one gave her credit, and that too was fine, because Elara Voss wasn't here for credit. She was here for truth, and truth doesn't shout, it waits. By early afternoon, frustration clung to the range like the rising heat off the valley floor. The 3,000-meter targets mocked the shooters, distant shapes on steel plates that refused to register a single solid hit. The winds had grown erratic. The sun dipped behind thick, sluggish clouds, and the air began to feel heavier, like the whole place was holding its breath. Lieutenant Hale tried again. Adjusted, recentered. Crack. Miss. Corporal Sutter's turn followed. His setup was confident, movements sharp, but the result? Another miss. Murmurs began to rise from the watching team. No one said it aloud, but it was clear. Today wasn't going to be a record-setting day, at least, not for them. Back behind the ready line, Elara Voss stood silently, scanning her data. She had already marked down crosswinds shifting at multiple altitudes, temperature drop over 1.7 degrees Celsius since the last shot, and, most importantly, a drift wall forming just past the 2,800-meter mark. That alone would have skewed every shot by at least 6 inches off-center. But no one had asked her what she saw, because no one thought she saw anything. Corporal Sutter cracked open a canteen and flopped down on a crate, sweat lining the edges of his brow. He was trying to hide it, but his frustration was leaking through. Hell, maybe the wind's cursed, he muttered, or maybe this range just knows. No one's breaking that shot. Someone nearby raised an eyebrow. Which shot? Sutter scoffed. You kidding? Gideon Voss's record. 3400, ghost shot. No one's even touched it in over a decade. They say it wasn't even real, just a fluke. He took another sip, then glanced over toward the weather station. But I guess Clipboard girl over there's got it all figured out, right? He added with a grin. Laughter, again. But this time, it didn't echo long, because Elara Voss was walking toward them. She walked with purpose, not anger, not pride, just precision, like she had measured the steps, the distance, the timing, and found it all acceptable. She didn't say a word, just stopped in front of the equipment rack, scanned for the correct case, and retrieved the Barrett M82, the one Corporal Sutter had just finished using. He frowned. You want to dry fire that or something? She said nothing. She moved past him, toward the open firing platform. At first, no one followed. It felt awkward, like someone had stepped into the wrong room at the wrong time. But then Lieutenant Hale rose, curious, and Sergeant Munoz, then others. Within seconds, the crowd had gathered. Elara laid the rifle down carefully, unfolded a shooting mat she had carried with her, one they hadn't even seen her bring, and adjusted her position. Everything about her setup was subtle, quiet, unorthodox. Her shooting stance was just slightly off from regulation form. Her elbow position, tighter than most. Her breathing, barely detectable. Then she did something none of them had seen before. She raised her hand, palm facing the sky, and rotated it slowly, feeling the wind not at the surface, but at 3 different points in the air. The movement wasn't in any manual, but the veterans watching fell silent, because suddenly they weren't watching a weather girl. They were watching someone who knew something they didn't. She chambered the round, checked her data, once, breathed, once, and fired. Boom! The sound rolled across the hills like thunder. Silence followed. No one spoke. No one moved. Then, a sharp voice over the comms. Target 340. Confirmed impact. Center mass. Still, silence. No cheers. Just heads turning, eyes narrowing, breath held. Then Master Sergeant Rourke stepped forward, slowly, his expression unreadable. He turned to the junior comms officer manning the logbook station. Enter the data, he said. The young man hesitated. Sir, we need the shooter's full name for the record. The group turned as one. Elara stood up slowly. She didn't dust herself off, didn't smile, just turned her head slightly and spoke clearly. Elara Voss. The effect was instantaneous. Sergeant Rourke's eyes locked onto her. Someone in the back muttered under their breath. And Sutter? His mouth parted slightly, the color draining from his face. Voss? As in Gideon Voss? She didn't respond. Didn't need to, because that name, Voss, had been a ghost on that range for over a decade. And now, the ghost had returned. The moment the name left her lips, Elara Voss. Something shifted in the air. It wasn't just surprise anymore. It was recognition, unease, guilt. Master Sergeant Rourke froze mid-step, his expression unreadable. He looked at her as if seeing a ghost. Not her, but the shadow of someone else. Someone long buried. He didn't say anything, just gave a sharp nod and turned away. 20 minutes later, a junior soldier approached Elara at the range. Specialist Voss, Sergeant Rourke wants to see you. Command center, now. She followed without a word, her walk, calm, composed. But inside, her pulse was a silent drum. This was the moment she had prepared for. Not the shot, not the reaction, but this. The command center at Fort Blackwood wasn't fancy. Just concrete walls, steel fixtures, and a faint hum of secure servers behind locked doors. But what it lacked in comfort, it made up for in what it protected. Secrets. Rourke sat alone in the briefing room. A thick folder lay open in front of him. The edges were creased. The cover stamped, classified, eyes only. He didn't look up as Elara entered. Sit, he said. She did. He pushed the folder forward without speaking. Inside were photographs, maps, mission reports, and, at the very top, a death certificate. Operation Longshot, Rourke said quietly. You've seen this file before. She didn't nod, didn't confirm, but the silence said enough. Your father, he added, was assigned to provide sniper cover for an extraction team in the Torah foothills. High elevation, unstable winds, 3,000-meter shots, high risk. She didn't speak. He refused the final order, Rourke continued, claimed there were civilians in the target zone. Command said otherwise. He held his position. Elara's jaw tensed. He was reprimanded, removed from duty, awaiting court-martial. And then, Rourke tapped the final page. Suicide, officially. This time Elara did speak. I never believed that. Her voice was steady, but the edge was sharp, honed from 8 years of silence. My father didn't kill himself. He was silenced because he saw something that didn't match the story they wanted told. Rourke studied her for a long moment. Then he leaned back, hands folded. You know, I was there, he said. Not as a shooter. I was on the extraction team. I saw the aftermath, the bodies, the chaos, the civilians. Elara's eyes narrowed. Then you know he was right. Rourke nodded, almost imperceptibly. I've spent years trying to forget that mission. Most of us did. The general who signed the order, he got promoted. The files? Buried. Gideon Voss? Discredited. And me? Elara said. I spent years tracking every operation that even resembled Longshot, waiting for a mission with the same parameters, the same terrain, the same ethical test. She leaned in. When I saw the briefing for this mission, I knew this was my chance to finish what he started. Not the shot, the truth. Rourke looked at her for a long moment, then closed the file slowly. Well, Specialist Voss, your shot today, 3,140 meters. Verified, recorded. That's 140 meters beyond your father's disputed record. It wasn't about the record, she said. I know, Rourke replied, but it will matter when we reopen the investigation. Elara exhaled, the weight of years pressing against her ribs. Not gone, but shifting, lighter. They tried to erase him, she whispered, but I remember every shot he didn't take. Rourke nodded solemnly. And now, so will everyone else. The next morning, Fort Blackwood was cloaked in thin mountain mist, the kind that blurs the horizon and hangs heavy over every word. Elara Voss arrived at the briefing room 10 minutes early. She hadn't slept much, but it didn't matter. Her mind was clear, sharper than any scope. She'd been waiting 8 years for this. Master Sergeant Rourke stood at the head of the table, flanked by digital projection screens and sat imagery. Around the room, the other shooters filed in slowly. Less dismissive now, more deliberate. Even Corporal Sutter kept quiet as he took his seat. When Rourke spoke, the tone had changed. Today's live simulation is being upgraded to mission-ready status. Extraction Point Alpha is now active. Command wants a full field test under live environment variables. He turned to the screen. High-altitude ridge. Wind shear unpredictable. Fog pockets forming. Target zone here. He pointed to a red-marked valley basin, 3,200 meters from the shooter nest. Sound familiar? The silence in the room was unmistakable. It was the exact same terrain profile as Operation Longshot. Elara's hands didn't move, but inside her heart slowed. The moment was here, exactly as she had foreseen. Lead shooter, Specialist Elara Voss, Rourke said firmly. Some eyes widened. Others glanced around, testing reactions. No one objected. Spotter, Lieutenant Hale. The two exchanged a glance. His look held no sarcasm now, only focus. At the armory, Elara was handed a brand-new Barrett M107, custom-fitted with atmospheric sensors and a digitally enhanced long-range optic. Not borrowed this time, the technician said with a nod. She inspected the rifle slowly, checked its weight, its balance, its soul. It wasn't her father's rifle, but the principle was the same. Nearby, Hale reviewed satellite overlays, marking real-time shifts in cloud density and wind streams. You ready? He asked quietly. Elara looked him in the eye. I've been ready since they buried the truth. They hiked up to the ridge by mid-morning. Their nest was a natural outcropping, partially concealed, sloped for stability, with a perfect vantage point over the valley. Elara lay prone, steadying her breathing, while Hale set up the comms and laser rangefinder. The target zone appeared as a faint outline below, a ruined structure, where the extraction team would stage its final maneuver. Barometric pressure dropping, Hale reported. Winds unstable past the halfway mark. I see it, Elara replied. Split current again. Top flow cuts north, lower layer drags southeast. You've seen that before? It killed my father's shot, she said. Not this time. Through the scope, the world narrowed. She adjusted for distance, rotation, dew point, terrain deflection. The digital overlay responded to every shift of her hand. Then she saw them. 3 figures, moving at the far end of the structure, not armed, not uniformed. One of them, small, a child. Hale, she said, voice tight. Confirm visual on non-combatants. Hale followed her scope, adjusted lens filters, enhanced infrared. Negative confirmation from command. Satellite reads clear. Look again, she insisted. Back left quadrant. He zoomed, then froze. I see them. They're not supposed to be there. Command just marked sector green. They want the shot ready. They're wrong, she said flatly. A memory flickered, not of her father shooting, but not shooting. His voice. The hardest shot isn't the one that tests your aim. It's the one that tests your conscience. Her finger hovered above the trigger. The math said she could make the shot, but math didn't factor in what came after the bullet left the barrel. This is Elara Voss to command, she said firmly into comms. We have civilians in the target zone. Recommend aborting mission. Repeat, civilians present. A pause. Overwatch, this is command. Our feed shows no heat signatures. Proceed with the objective. Hale looked at her. What now? We don't shoot. Then we disobey. No, she said. We document. He nodded. While Elara stayed locked on target, Hale recorded and streamed infrared footage through backup uplinks. Clear outlines of civilians. Undeniable proof. 5 minutes passed. Then, a new voice crackled through comms. All units, mission abort. Repeat, abort. Extraction team, return to insertion point immediately. Elara exhaled slowly. She hadn't fired a single shot, but it was the most important trigger she had ever not pulled. For a moment, the ridge was silent, except for the quiet hum of the comms and the wind brushing across Elara's cheek. Through her scope, the figures remained, faint silhouettes at the edge of the ruined structure. A child moved behind a broken wall. An adult gestured frantically. Civilians, without question. She could still hear command's last transmission echoing in her headset. Overwatch, proceed with the objective. We have no confirmed non-combatants in the sector. But her eyes told a different story, and her gut, it whispered the same warning her father had once ignored, to his ruin. We're not taking the shot, she repeated calmly. Lieutenant Hale looked at her. Really looked. There was no doubt in her eyes, no hesitation, no fear, just conviction. They'll call it insubordination, he said. Then let them, she replied, but not after we prove it. Without another word, he activated the secondary uplink, rerouting power from the targeting scope to his infrared camera. He adjusted the calibration to cut through the shifting mist. The enhanced footage showed it clearly now. 3 warm bodies moving, one of them under 4 feet tall. Recording now, he confirmed. Time stamped, location locked. They transmitted the feed directly to command. It would take a few minutes for Central to verify, and Elara knew from her father's files. Sometimes minutes were the difference between justice and silence. She didn't move from her scope, not because she intended to fire, but because she refused to look away. Just as Gideon Voss hadn't. Her finger stayed clear of the trigger guard. This time, the weight wasn't in the rifle. It was in the decision not to use it. The comms crackled again. A different voice now. Sharper, more urgent. Overwatch, this is command. Stand by. Possible satellite confirmation incoming. 10 seconds, 30, a full minute. Then, confirmed, civilians present in target zone. Mission abort. Repeat, abort mission. Extraction team, return to insertion point immediately. Hale exhaled. His posture softened. Elara didn't move. Not yet. It took another 5 seconds before she slowly removed her eye from the scope. Her hands, steady the entire time, now rested gently on the rifle stock. The silence that followed wasn't filled with relief. It was filled with something deeper. Vindication. For the first time, someone had listened. Back at Fort Blackwood, Elara entered the command center alongside Hale. Rourke was already waiting. The lights were dim. The main screen displayed paused infrared footage. The child's outline clearly visible in the lower left quadrant. He looked up slowly as they approached. You saw what no one else saw, he said. It was there, she answered quietly. They just didn't want to look. Rourke nodded once. And your father? He made the same call, refused the shot, reported what he saw. They told him to proceed too. His voice dropped to a near whisper. But no one listened. He stepped closer, tapping the screen. This time we did. This time the mission was called off, and no one died. There was no need for ceremony, no medals, just truth. And that, for Elara, was enough. Your father was right, Rourke said, locking eyes with her. And this time, we listened. It started quietly, not with a press release, not with an apology, just a file. Once sealed, now reopened. Operation Longshot had been locked under 2 layers of security clearance for 8 years, but now with Elara's evidence and the video logs from the aborted mission, the cracks in the story could no longer be ignored. Satellite confirmation of civilians, mission logs showing contradictions, a signed override order that ignored a sniper's warning. All of it, eerily identical to what had happened to Gideon Voss. But this time, the ending was different. This time, the truth had a witness. A formal review board convened within 2 weeks. Quiet, internal, but undeniable. Gideon Voss's decision to withhold fire was found to be the correct tactical call. The original claims of negligence were reversed. The official cause of death reclassified from suicide pending court-martial to death in line of duty under contested political circumstances. To those outside the military, that phrase meant little. To those within, it was everything. It meant we were wrong. It meant he never failed. At Fort Blackwood, a small ceremony was held at the Marksman's Wall of Honor, a curved granite monument bearing the etched names and distances of the most legendary shots in recorded history. The plaque near the center had once been quietly removed, its absence unexplained. Now it returned, freshly engraved. Gideon Voss, 3,400 memora, confirmed. Sometimes the hardest shot is the one you choose not to take. And just beneath it, added that same morning, Elara Voss, 3,140. Confirmed, truth does not echo in applause. It stands alone, unshaken. Elara stood before the wall as the sun cut golden across the stone. Her reflection shimmered faintly beside his name. In her hand, a photograph, old, creased, and soft at the edges, showed her father smiling beside a makeshift paper target and a young girl holding a scope upside down. She let the silence settle. No one spoke. not even Rourke, standing respectfully to the side. Because in that moment, no words were needed. Her father's name had been cleared, his truth confirmed, and their legacy now carved side by side. Some stories don't end when the mission ends. Sometimes they echo through generations, waiting for someone to finish what was left undone. Gideon Voss stood by his principles, even when it cost him everything. Years later, his daughter Elara proved that honor doesn't fade. It waits quietly for the right moment to return. This wasn't just a story about a record-breaking shot. It was about choosing integrity over recognition, even when no one is watching. And in today's world, where doing the right thing is often the hardest thing, that lesson still matters. Maybe you've been in that situation, told to stay quiet, follow orders, or ignore what your gut told you was wrong. Maybe you chose to speak up, or maybe you still carry that decision with you. If so, we'd be honored if you shared your thoughts in the comments. Whose truth deserves to be remembered? What shot did you hold back or take that changed everything? Elara's story reminds us, the most important targets aren't always on a battlefield. Sometimes they're found in silence, justice, and the legacy we leave behind. Thank you for listening to this journey. If it meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in quiet strength and second chances. And remember, the right shot doesn't always echo, but it always leaves a mark.